Right now on the National Weather Desk, wildfire emergency. Thousands evacuate as fast-moving flames threaten homes at a prominent university in Southern California, all thanks to Santa Ana winds.
The National Weather Service reporting gusts over 50 miles an hour in that area.
Hurricane season is over. We'll ask the deputy director of the National Hurricane Center how they are preparing for next year.
More people die in rip currents than storm surge. We got to push rip currents up.
What's your nor'easter knowledge?
And there are two types. We have Miller A and Miller B.
Coyote concerns are growing in New England.
The three that chased us were probably 20 feet behind us.
And the massive volcanic eruption that was caught on camera.
The National Weather Desk.
I'm Janae Bowens. A fast-moving wildfire is burning in Malibu, California this morning. It was first reported at 11 o'clock last night. Within hours, it exploded in size thanks to the strong Santa Ana winds. Now, the so-called Franklin fire has already burned more than 1,800 acres. Thousands of people were ordered to evacuate. Overnight, the flames jumped two major roads, including the Pacific Coast Highway. It's not known how many homes and businesses are damaged or destroyed. The cause of the fire is also not known. Now, this is very close to Pepperdine University. Students and staff were told to shelter in place. The entire region is under a red flag warning as the warm, dry Santa Ana winds produce gusts up to 80 miles per hour. Those winds are troubling for residents across Southern California, especially those trying to recover from a fire that destroyed thousands of acres last month. Luzdeya Caballero has more.
As you see, this whole place has been torched.
Tom Doria remembering when he and his wife fled their Cerro Crest neighborhood last month as the mountain fire tore through more than 20,000 acres, destroying more than 100 homes.
I think that was a freak fire. Now we have a lot of dead trees, and so I imagine that's fairly vulnerable.
He's already done what he can to clear the area and protect his home, which was saved, but he's not able to wet down the land around it.
All my irrigation burnt up, so we just hope.
Was that a Jaguar?
Yes, 1958 XK150 Jaguar.
David Reed is looking through the rubble where his house once stood.
The most valuable thing we found was my wife's wedding band, and we found it down the slope there. I knew fairly well where it had come from. It was on the third floor of the house, and it was totally black. And like I said, it had gotten a little smaller. She couldn't put it in her finger any longer.
He says he's come back several times to see what he can salvage.
We're concerned about the wind that's coming. This could happen again, and it could happen this week.
Adding his neighbors are doing their part to prevent future fire damage here.
It seems like they're cutting vegetation,
Right.
soaking the soil.
Yeah, there is a little bit of that. Of course, I don't have any water here. They've shut it all down.
Reed's thankful he and his wife were able to make it out. Now he's concerned about the few neighbors left on his street.
Right now, there are only 4 houses occupied on this street. It's depressing because before we had 26 homes here.
Now, this is the time of year when nor'easters strike the East Coast. And there are actually 2 different types of nor'easters. Meteorologist Emily Santum explains.
To begin, a nor'easter is a storm along the east coast of North America, and it's called that due to the northeasterly winds mostly along the coastline. Nor'easters typically happen between September and all the way to April, kind of what we saw last April. And there are 2 types. We have Miller A and Miller B. So let's first begin with Miller A. It actually depends on where it's located. It typically develops in the Gulf of Mexico or along the southeasterly coastline. It then rapidly intensifies as it moves northeastward, either sometimes northerly, up the coastline. Mid-Atlantic and New England states usually are hit the hardest in a situation like this, but icy conditions can occur as far south as Georgia and even the Carolinas. Severe weather is also possible in Florida, which is pretty crazy from a nor'easter. An example of this was the superstorm of 1993. The second type is Miller B, and this is typically what we see as our New England nor'easters. A couple of our examples, it actually originates as an area of low pressure over the Midwest, then begins to move eastward. The low begins to weaken as it hits the Appalachian Mountains, and another low actually forms on the east side of the mountain ranges, closer to the coastline. The warmer Gulf Stream water begins to help it intensify at its as it turns northwards or even easternwards towards New England. And heavy snow is likely for New England and the mid-Atlantic. The example of this was back in February 2010 for the North American blizzard. That brought a lot of snowfall to the mid-Atlantic once again in February 2010.
A 5.8 magnitude earthquake struck near Reno, Nevada yesterday afternoon. Shaking was felt throughout western parts of the state as well as eastern California. There are no reports of damage or injury due to the quake. There have been at least 12 aftershocks ranging between 2.5 and 3.5 magnitude. A 7 magnitude earthquake last week off the coast of California led to a tsunami warning. Scientists at the National Weather Service say a tsunami warning is usually issued following coastal earthquakes with a magnitude 6.5 or higher. The moment the tsunami warning was issued, many people immediately evacuated as instructed. Some chose to drive long distances instead of getting to designated safe areas, which is typically just 10 to 15 minutes away from a tsunami zone.
At the initial estimate, all we knew was that there was a 7.3 earthquake underwater. In that case, the only thing you can do is start the evacuation process and get out. Anything above a 7.1 from the National Tsunami Warning Center is a tsunami warning to get people out of the way.
The National Weather Service says the best way to prepare for a tsunami warning is by practicing evacuation routes regularly. You should also know your evacuation zone at home as well as at work. The Appalachian Trail extends from Georgia to Maine, but since Hurricane Helene, portions of the trail in Southwest Virginia have been impassable. Liam Bridgman gives us a look at the damage and the group volunteer effort to restore that portion of the trail.
The damage here to the Appalachian Trail is extensive after Helene. At least 100 trail miles have been damaged, and they've left things like this massive tree in the way for hikers. But groups from across the state have gathered here in Damascus to help get the trail back to what it once was.
There's more to do, but we have made amazing progress considering the level of damage. I'm optimistic that we'll have a walkable trail all the way through Virginia soon. We're getting there.
The trail work here on the Appalachian Trail isn't open to the public. That's because it can be very dangerous at times.
In Rhode Island, coyotes are becoming a major problem. Residents are concerned after a noticeable uptick in reports. As Aaron Kukin explains, seasonal sightings of the animals are normal, but recently things have escalated.
7 against 1 with 2 dogs. It's not a fair matchup.
For the past 25 years, Karen Jackson has been growing her family in a house off Broadway in Newport. Since moving in, she says seasonal sightings of coyotes have become common. But in the past 5 years or so, things have escalated. Most recently, spotting a pack of 7 coyotes just down the road from her home.
I think they've gotten very brazen, but we have had an explosion of bunnies, and I think they're just coming for food.
Of course, we have a number of critters that people are more used to seeing in urban settings, like raccoons, etc. But coyotes are really successful in urban settings as well, and so you're likely to see them.
In the past 3 years, Jackson says she's been stalked, chased, and harassed by growing packs of coyotes on several different occasions.
So I've been chased twice.
Recalling one particularly horrifying encounter,
I would say the 3 that chased us were probably as close as 20 feet behind us.
Jackson says she and her 2 dogs were pursued for several hundred yards by not 1, not 2, but 3 aggressive coyotes.
I won't lie, I screamed and then ran. Running from them still wasn't a deterrent, like they wanted us.
It's the reason she now walks with extra supplies.
I do now carry a walking stick with me, a air horn gun.
Good safeguards, according to DEM coyote expert Morgan Lucott.
It's really important that we sort of maintain an understanding between us and the coyotes that, we're not going to exist in the same close space if we don't have to.
Take a look at this time lapse showing the eruption of a large volcano in the central Philippines. The volcano is one of the most active in the country. It's been sprouting a column of ash and gas up nearly 2 miles into the sky. More than 80,000 people have been ordered to leave their homes. And coming up on the National Weather Desk, the 2024 hurricane season is over. We'll look back at this year's major storms, and we'll help you better understand lake effect snow.
I'm meteorologist Charlie Lopresti with a look at the Northeast. Last night's rain and snow, that has made its way off to the Northeast. We have a lot of clouds out there today. Might be a hint of drizzle or perhaps a little bit of freezing drizzle in spots, but I don't anticipate any organized precipitation during the day today. Tonight, however, we're introducing round number 2. This will bring some rain, and a little bit of freezing rain is possible in northern New England. The lion's share of our rainfall in the Northeast will be on Wednesday, with our strongest winds expected Wednesday evening and into Wednesday night.
I'm Chief Meteorologist Gerard Jabali. Here's a look at the Mid-Atlantic region. We're still dry throughout your Tuesday morning, but in the afternoon, another couple disturbances are on the way. We'll see scattered showers becoming likely towards the second half of the day. Rain becoming even more likely and heavy as we move through Wednesday afternoon. The front will go by. We'll see the rain threat ending as we move through Wednesday evening. But temperatures mild to start out until Wednesday night when that front rolls through, and it will be much colder.
Good morning. I'm meteorologist Charlotte Carl. We are looking across the southeast at your afternoon highs. We can see exactly where that frontal boundary is positioned because we have Little Rock and Memphis to the north in the 50s, while areas to the south are in the upper 60s, low 70s, and in South Florida in the low 80s. Now, we are tracking that front to continue developing throughout the day Tuesday. We'll see some back-end development overnight Tuesday heading into Wednesday before it makes its way into South Georgia, South Carolina, and parts of Florida.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
The Atlantic hurricane season was forecasted to be active, but active doesn't begin to describe what unfolded. While it may not have been a season with dozens of storms, it certainly left a mark in many communities. Emily Gracie sat down with the deputy director of the National Hurricane Center to discuss the past 6 months and what the agency is working on for next year.
Looking back at the season, did anything really surprise you, catch you off guard? Anything really noteworthy about the 2024 season in your eyes?
Just how much people want to latch onto simple explanations. So hurricanes are incredibly nuanced, very, very, very nuanced, and they're getting more nuanced as time goes on because society is more vulnerable, more complicated. So people want a simple explanation. It's busy because of El Nino or not El Nino, or it's busy because the ocean is warm. This model is always the right model. And they want these easy answers and explanations. And it's nuanced and complicated. And we cannot conflate, we react to this temptation, right? And we react to the fact that people consume information in little snippets with this desire to conflate things. And we've got to resist that challenge and continue to communicate the entirety of the phenomenon, because telling people why they've been ordered to evacuate, telling people why they're under a hurricane warning, telling people why they got smoked with winds even though they were outside of the cone, that's why we have trust.
All right. So what's new for next season?
We want to make sure that we're looking at all of the data versus jumping to a conclusion soon. There'll be year 2 of the cone. It's more than likely going to be largely the same, with maybe minor, tiny little changes based off comments. So like making the legend, more easy to understand, stuff like that. And we're going to look at continuing to improve the hazard communication side. We lose so many people in rip currents. More people die in rip currents than storm surge. We got to push rip currents up to the forefront.
This interview is part of a much longer discussion that Emily and Jamie had about hurricane hazards and communication. That discussion can be heard on this week's episode of our podcast, Off the Radar. Listen to Off the Radar anywhere you get your podcasts. Now, with the close of hurricane season, attention in North Carolina has shifted to wildfires. A new forecast predicts a significant fire season for much of the state, and officials say Helene is one reason for an increased risk. Andrew James has more.
An ominous outlook for fire-prone areas of South Carolina.
This is not going to be a normal season. This is going to be somewhat above that.
Fueled in the upstate by Helene storm damage and a likely La Nina dry pattern for the coast. The wildland fire forecast for the first time in years. It predicts an above-normal fire season for the Grand Strand and coastal Lowcountry.
It does look pretty bad. The whole map is red basically for the next 3 months. And, you know, we, as the state fire agency, forestry agencies, we have input into that.
Chief Darrell Jones leads the SC Forestry Commission's Protection Division against wildfires. This week, his department trained with SLED, equipping their search helicopters with water buckets.
We are looking ahead now as we sort of in that transition with the fuels and the weather to get ready.
County officials in Horry are doing the same.
So right now, we're able to get after these fires quickly. They're slow-moving fires, but it's not to say that couldn't change.
Captain Tim Rainbolt leads Horry County's Special Wildfire Response Team. His message mirrors the report that conditions this fire season could change and change fast.
We're okay, but by no means does that give anybody the go-ahead to not use common sense and do the perimeters of when they want to go and burn.
Parameters like seeking a permit if you plan to burn a large debris pile, having a water source for any type of burn, and making sure the weather itself doesn't add fuel to the fire.
We have a lot of potential for a bigger than normal season, and for any individual fire, you know, there may be a lot more potential for it to get bigger because it's in more fuel or the conditions are drier.
Last week, we heard a lot about lake effect snow. Meteorologist Joey Bettenhausen posted about lake effect snow on Instagram and says it can show up in places you might not expect.
To get lake effect snow, well, simply you need a lake and a northerly wind. Now, this happens over the Great Lakes because, well, you're getting that cold air directly from Canada. And usually at this time, the lake water is warmer than the actual air temperature aloft. So in this model that you see right above here, you have the cold air rushing across the warm water. Well, the warm water, we know it carries more heat, it carries more moisture. That rises and thus creates a cloud. And if you get enough of a stronger temperature difference, you can get snow or even rain out of it. Now, normally these lake effect snow bands are very narrow. These northerly winds have to hit the water just right. And you can see this generally will create a lake effect snow band on the southern and eastern section of the lake, as you can see right here in our satellite photo. So essentially one town can receive a foot of snowfall and the next town over, nothing. It's interesting how this works. I've dealt with this going to school in Valparaiso, Indiana. Pretty interesting.
When you think of winter sports, skiing and snowboarding may come to mind, but some paddling enthusiasts also enjoy taking to the water when temperatures turn frigid. Meteorologist Garrett Hyde has some tips to keep in mind before having fun on cold water.
Canoeing and kayaking may seem like good warm weather activities, but experienced paddlers may find that some of the best times to hit the water is actually when it's colder out. Whatever the reason, if you do plan on hitting the water this winter, here's a few things you should keep in mind. First and foremost, make sure you're dressed appropriately and always dress for the worst case scenario, falling in.
This is one of the most dangerous times of the year when it comes to paddling. You know, when the water temperature drops below 60 degrees, you're automatically at risk for hypothermia. So if you're not wearing the right gear, the right type of clothing to protect yourself from that cold water, it can turn fatal extremely quickly.
So be sure to wear a dry suit or a wetsuit, along with layers of wool fabrics to help avoid hypothermia or cold water shock. Along with that, make sure all coats and jackets are water and at least windproof. And as always, regardless of the time of the year, always make sure you're wearing your life jacket.
There's certain items that you should take, like a dry bag, and take a change of clothing out with you if you're going out on cold water, because you need to get out of wet clothes right away. So having that extra dry clothing, having your phone, having a whistle with you at all times so when you're in your group you can communicate or give out a call, an SOS call. Good pogies on your paddle so they make these gloves that slip onto your paddle and it keeps your hands warm.
Aside from making sure you have the right gear, do make sure you know what you're doing. Be familiar with your boat, your strokes, and ability to navigate around obstacles. As always, make sure you check the conditions beforehand and file what Todd calls a float plan, which is essentially just telling someone where you're going and where you plan to go. And if you can, try to be as specific as possible. And make sure to include when you're going and when you plan to check in. And lastly, don't paddle alone, especially in the wintertime.
Time now for a short break, but first we take flight over the mountains of Utah.
Well, a very good Tuesday morning, everyone. I'm meteorologist Andrew Buck-Michael. Got some light snow across the northern plains today and some rain showers out across the Ohio Valley as we continue on into your day tomorrow. Cold across a lot of the Midwest. Look at that, only 7 for the high in Bismarck tomorrow. And then as we head into your Thursday, not much warmer for us. The only place getting into the 50s looks to be Wichita. Most of us only in the 20s and teens.
Well, a good Tuesday morning to you. Meteorologist Chris Suchant. Look at our forecast today across the region. We do have a cold front to start the day. South Texas working through New Orleans. Behind it, windy and cooler air rushing south. Highs only 40s, 50s to the 60s near the Gulf Coast. You see a mix of clouds and sun through the day. And then Wednesday in the morning, pretty cold across the region with those temperatures. A sunny day and cool. Highs in the 50s and 60s Wednesday afternoon.
Well, hi there, everybody, and a good Tuesday morning to you. I'm meteorologist Shannon O'Donnell. Out west, it's certainly chilly over the Continental Divide and into Jackson Hole, Wyoming. A high of 26 there today near Yellowstone versus 74 in San Diego. Reason it's so warm there in Southern California, we've got the Santa Ana's high pressure sitting in the interior of Nevada, blowing toward the California coastline, and that is upping the wildfire danger. And that's the scene from here.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
A view of downtown Salt Lake City taken during the weekend. This was on the tail end of inversions, which trapped smog and fog in the valley. These building tops peeked out of the thin veil of fog Saturday night. A view of approaching nightfall through a colorful sunset, and a fiery Monday sunrise in Maine. And back to Utah, where these fluffs of snowfall settled on red dogwood branches.
Listen to Off the Radar. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
In Washington state, recent snow has been great news for ski lovers. Meteorologist Stella Sun explains.
'Tis the season for shredding. The flakes falling this weekend in the mountains thanks to a series of weather disturbances. 5 inches at Crystal Mountain, 9 inches at White Pass, 11 inches at Mount Baker, 14 inches at Stevens Pass. The summit at Snoqualmie reports 4 inches of new snow. While opening day has not been announced yet, the ski resort is selling lift tickets online for this Saturday, December 14th. Looking ahead, the Climate Prediction Center forecasts a 40 to 50% above average chance for precipitation between December 13th and the 17th.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Janae Bowens. Make it a great Tuesday, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.